Legend of Total War here, and today we've got a tier list using Tier Maker, this time covering all playable legendary lords in Warhammer 2 and Gotrek. So Gotrek isn't one that you can start off as, but you can play as him, so I put him in there, and we'll talk about him at the end. Okay, so what we're going to go through here, it's going to be a lot more brief than other legendary lord comparisons. If I put the amount of detail into each legendary lord in this video as I did in those videos, this would be a 4-hour long video, and I don't have time to do that. So this is going to be fairly brief by comparison, but I've got a pretty good understanding of all of these legendary lords. I've played them all before, quite extensively, so I know where all of them belong. I'm going to base their rating based on the 3 criteria that I always base it off. You know, how good they are personally in the battlefield, whether that's their melee capability or spellcasting, how good they are at boosting their army, and how good they are at boosting their faction. I'm not going to take their personal faction that they start off with into consideration. So, as an example, Alithanar's ability to stalk, so ambush attack, that is a Nagaroth ability. It's not actually Alithanar's ability, whereas Torok's ability to raid rampage, like he goes into raid stance and gets 50% movement, he retains that even when he gets confederated out of his faction. However, he doesn't get his rampage mechanic in that. Now, we've already done a faction tier list, so if you're interested to see the difference between those factions, maybe watch those 2 videos one after another. That's entirely up to you. But I'm going to be fairly brief with all of these, otherwise it's going to take forever, because there is a lot of them, and I'd like for this video to be under an hour, but we'll see how we go. Alright, let's jump into it. So, starting with the High Elves, we got Tyrion at the forefront here. He is an S tier legendary lord. While he wouldn't get a 10 out of 10, he is at least a 9 out of 10. So he is really good on the battlefield. A lot of people criticize him for his horse, but the thing is, while horses are terrible mounts, his horse is actually exceptional because it's so fast. He's probably got the fastest horse in the game, and that speed really matters. It allows him to get around the battlefield really quickly and pick and choose his engagements. Definitely would be better if he had something like a dragon or something like that, but he really doesn't need it. He's really good on foot as well. It's entirely up to you how you want to utilize him. He boosts his early game by a ton by reducing the upkeep cost of archers and spearmen, allowing you to get your economy up and running in the early game, which is really useful. In the late campaign, doesn't really boost any particular troops, but that's fine because he allowed you to get a much earlier good start. And he does some really good faction-wide bonuses if you go down Majesty of Ulthuan. I don't recommend going down Bloodline of Venarian. If you go down Bloodline of Venarian, Tyrion drops to like a B tier legendary lord, but that's entirely up to you. Next up is Teklus. Now, people are going to criticize this one a bit, but Teklus doesn't meet the criteria to hit S tier. He is maybe the best legendary lord in the game on the battlefield. His spellcasting ability is second only to maybe Bellagar is like on par with him, right? Such a good spellcaster, can easily get 1,000 kills in every battle. But the problem with him is that he doesn't boost his army at all. The thing is, he doesn't need an army, right? So he can take on entire armies by himself, you know, when he gets properly leveled up. And he also doesn't really provide that much in terms of global bonuses. But you've got to hit good marks in all 3 criteria to hit the S tier. But because he's so good on the battlefield, he's definitely just a little bit under the S tier there. But he is an amazing battlefield combatant. Next up, we've got Alariel, one of the few legendary lords in the game that's actually a 10 out of 10. And that's because she hits good marks in all 3 criteria. While she isn't as good on the battlefield as Teklus, she is still like amazing on the battlefield. Being able to spellcast, you got an eagle mount, which is really good for her. She's got some really good abilities for healing. She's got everything that you need as a commander there. She also boosts her army by a ton. She boosts Sisters of Avalon and Handmaidens, which is really useful, and she provides massive global bonuses in her skill line. So definitely a 10 out of 10 legendary lord. I stand by that one. Because she just does so much for her race. Next up, we got Alithanar. Alithanar is also a 10 out of, not 10 out of 10, but he's an S tier legendary lord. He just didn't quite hit 10 out of 10. He is pretty good on the battlefield. Not the best melee combatant, but a good archer. His ability to create a doppelganger is also very useful. Not a spellcaster, so spellcasters usually get the highest scores for the battlefield score. In terms of his commanding ability, he is really good at commanding Shadow Walkers or Shadow Warriors. I actually gravitate more towards Shadow Warriors. I'm starting to like Shadow Walkers less and less, just because of the inconvenience of recruiting them and replacing them, but also how long it takes to recruit them. But whereas Shadow Warriors, it's a lot more convenient. And he also provides good global bonuses by his unique skill line, providing missile strength faction-wide and also extra public order faction-wide, which the High Elves don't really need that extra public order. They've got that elsewhere, but in the early game, it's very useful to get that. Then we've got Eltharion, also an S-tier legendary lord. Really good on the battlefield, got a good melee capabilities. Not the greatest melee fighter ever, but he's also a spellcaster, which is very useful. It's only high magic, but, you know, any magic is better than none. He boosts his army by more than probably anybody in the game. Any missile units in his army is going to be boosted by a ton because of Break Upon the Walls, which gives them constantly replenishing ammunition. He is the best lord in the game for dealing with offensive sieges, because you just can sit back and just fire with artillery for as long as you have patience for. So he's really, really good in that regard. And he also provides some good global bonuses. You know, being able to reduce the construct time and cost of walls is very useful, especially for defensive players, and also giving you extra global recruit slots. So he's definitely an S-tier legendary lord. Next up is Emrick. Emrick is also an S-tier legendary lord. So the High Elves as a whole they've got really good legendary lords. And it's kind of weird seeing Teklus underneath them, but it's just because he's got lopsided skills. So Emrick is of course an amazing melee fighter on his dragon. He can kill some people in like 2 or 3 hits. He's really bloody strong, and he's really good at boosting his army, which is primarily dragons, but really he could go with Sisters of Avalon as well, because he reduces the fire resistance of everybody in the local area, and Sisters of Avalon deal out fire damage, so it's very useful. And he provides a good amount of global bonuses. He's able to allow us to recruit nobles without an actual building, so you can recruit nobles anywhere, which is very useful. And I think and you get extra capacity for nobles. I think you provide, and some more research rate as well. So there's not a lot of global bonuses with Emrick, but those are very useful. Being able to recruit nobles anywhere is very handy. I think Teklus does allow you to recruit mages from anywhere, but the problem with Teklus is why he doesn't get up to S tier is just because he has no boosts at all for his army. Doesn't do anything for his army at all. Whereas all of these guys here, they do. So the High Elves as a faction, as a race, are very good legendary lords. Okay, now move on to Lissaman. These ones here don't have very good legendary lords. Starting with Big Fat Toad Pepe Frog, we've got Mazda Mundy. Mazda Mundy is a B tier legendary lord. He's really good on the battlefield. He's got a good mount, Zlak, which is an ancient Stegodon, and he's a decent spellcaster. Nowhere near as good as Teklus, which is weird because you'd think Mazda Mundy should be one of the best spellcasters in the game, but he just isn't. He doesn't really boost his army much at all. He boosts Temple Guard, reduces the upkeep cost of them by 50%. But the thing is, Temple Guard are one of the most ineffective units on the campaign map. They take too long to recruit for what they are, and they're still just melee infantry. And in many ways, you can actually make Saurus Warriors better than Temple Guard. So Mazda Mundy's bonus just isn't very good, and he provides absolutely no bonuses for his faction whatsoever. The only thing that's keeping him up here is the fact that he is so good in combat. The other things are just letting him down immensely. He's teetering on the edge of C tier there. Okay, next up is Crocodile. Crocodile is going to enter A tier. He is, of course, an amazing melee combatant. He boosts his army by a little bit by reducing the upkeep cost of Saurus Warriors. Now, comparing him to Tyrion, reducing the upkeep cost of early game units. The thing is, with Tyrion's is actually better because you can use archers much later on in the campaign, whereas Saurus Warriors will get outdated very quickly. And even at 50% reduced upkeep cost, Saurus Warriors are only a little bit more effective than Skinks with Javelins. So it's just not as valuable as Tyrion's ability. Apart from that, he doesn't really boost his army at all, but he does provide global bonuses in his skill line to all units faction-wide, as long as they're going up against certain races. So those are very useful, and that's one of the things that's getting him up to A tier there. Those global bonuses there provide a lot of leadership against like Chaos and Skaven and whatever, so that can be very handy. And then of course he gets Honored Elder, providing 1 public order faction wide, which is very useful. So he's one of the better legendary lords for the Lizardmen, maybe even the best. I think I did make him the best in my comparison of him, but his score is probably lower than the lowest High Elf, which is a bit weird. But anyway, the Lizardmen didn't get a whole lot of love. Next up, we've got Hennwin. I think Hennwin is an A-tier legendary lord. A lot of people dump on Hennwin, but I actually played a campaign with him recently, and I think he's actually pretty good. He's good in melee once he gets on his Ancient Stegodon Engine of the Gods mount. He's got Beast Magic, which I'm starting to warm up to. Flock of Doom is fairly decent, and he does reduce his casting cost on that. And he boosts a decent army for the Bestilled Ark of Sotek, and he also provides a small amount of global bonuses as well. A lot of public order, which the Lizardmen don't desperately need. Probably because there's just so many that do provide public order. But I think he's an A-tier legendary lord. You can make a decent army with him. Next up, we got Tic Tac Toe. So Tic Tac Toe, I'm gonna put at B tier, but he actually kind of teeters on the edge of A tier. I think he's better than Mazda Mundy. So here's the thing: he is one of the worst lords in the game in combat. Right? He just doesn't do much. He's a melee combatant, and he loses to other melee combatant focused lords. Just not that strong. The fact that he flies is okay, but he can't really sweep very well, and he just doesn't have much melee capabilities. But where he shines is that he makes a really good Coatl Doom stack, and he provides some decent global bonuses as well. But nowhere near as much as I think is to Hennwin, and I just think he's just a little bit lacking. But he's not as bad as what he used to be. He used to be like a D tier legendary lord. Ever since they introduced Coatls, he's passable now. You can make a good army with him with that. But yeah, I usually, if I'm going to do that, which I did in one of my campaigns, I usually just kept him out of combat just because he's kind of useless. In that regard, at least. Next up, we've got the mother of all useful legendary lords, Nakai the Wanderer, heading 10 out of nope. He's going straight into the trash, into the D tier. Nakai is arguably one of the worst legendary lords in the game. He is so bad. His only good redeeming quality is he's okay. He's like decent in melee, right? He's decent. But the thing is, he is quite a big target. It's very easy to shoot him. It's very easy for halberds or spearmen to take him down as well. And these are some of the most common units in the game that you'll go up against. One of the best strategies with him is using a Crocodile blob, because he's got an area of effect, a bonus to melee attack and physical resistance, active ability. That can really turn the tide, depending on how many units you actually activate it on. But it's, akin to just using a spell like Curse of the Midnight Wind or something like that. But maybe a bit more potent than that. He doesn't really boost anything apart from Croxagores, which are not one of the most effective units in the game. You're better off having like an unboosted Stegodon spam than a boosted Croxagore spam, or an unboosted Bastillodon spam even than unboosted Croxagore, in most situations at least. And he doesn't provide any global bonuses. And one of the worst things about Nakai is that if you're not playing a Spirit of the Jungle and you confederate him, and you're given an army, and you realize how terrible he actually is, you can't actually kick him out. His boot icon is actually grayed out, and you have to get him wounded in order to get rid of him. So he's actually a really big pain in the ass. He's just a burden to confederate him from other factions. So definitely a D tier legendary lord. He's probably the most abandoned out of any of the DLC lords. He really needs a bit of TLC because he's just terrible. Alright, next up we got Gorok. So Gorok is one of the best melee combatants in the game for sure, but that's about it. I'm going to put him at B tier. He makes a really good Saurus Doomstack though. Now I don't value that highly, but he can do it. So the thing is with him, he's amazing in combat. He can duel enemy lords, he can fight hundreds of units and get hundreds of kills every battle. He's got regen in his skill line, he's got loads of physical resistance, he can get loads of magic resistance. He's really hard to kill. He can get unbreakable, really hard to kill. But yeah, he doesn't get a mount, so his speed is a problem. He doesn't boost anything apart from like Saurus warriors or just Saurus units, which is fine in the early game. But he does boost them by a ton, whereas Crocodile, he reduces the upkeep cost. So basically, if you want a cheap Saurus stack, you go with Crocodile. If you want a good Saurus stack, you go with Gorok. And then he doesn't provide any global bonuses apart from Honored Elder, which is something that any generic Saurus character can get. So I'm going to put him at B tier there. The thing that's keeping him up is his battlefield capabilities. He's very good at that. And then we've got Oxido over here. So Oxido is a bit of a weird one. I think I'm going to put him also at B tier because I think with Oxido he is a little bit difficult to use. He doesn't provide any global bonuses to his faction, so he's basically disabled from hitting S tier. He can do a lot of damage on the battlefield, especially if you give him the specific poison that he gets one of his banners, and he does make a pretty good Chameleon Skink or Chameleon Stalker army. But I don't value that highly, but I definitely value it higher than Saurus Warriors. It's just in the late game, going up against armored and fast units, I think that'll suffer a little bit. But Oxido totally can get like hundreds of kills in a battle as long as he doesn't get detected. But as soon as he does get detected, he's dead meat. But I'll put him at B tier. I don't think he quite deserves to be at C tier or at A tier. I think he's right in the middle there at B tier. Next up, we've got Dark Elves. First up is Malekith. Malekith is an S tier legendary lord. Great melee combatant, great spellcaster. Doesn't really boost his army by a ton, but he's similar to Tyrion, where he boosts his early game units like Dark Shards, which is very useful because that's primarily the unit you're going to use until you get Shades or whatever it is you want to get. He does also reduce the upkeep cost of Blackguard of Nagaron, but I find them to be a very ineffective unit. And then he does provide very good global bonuses, regardless of which line that you choose, whether you go Tyrant or War Leader. I definitely prefer to go down Tyrant, but if you prefer to go down War Leader, that's fine as well. So, not a 10 out of 10 Legendary Lord, but definitely above a 9. Then we've got Morathi. Morathi is also an S tier Legendary Lord. Just one of the greatest spellcasters in the game. Definitely on par with Teklus. She provides a lot of bonuses to Shades in the local area, so she's good at boosting the army, and she's also got loads of global bonuses in her skill tree. So she's very good for her race entirely. Then we've got Hellebron. Hellebron is probably a B tier legendary lord. She's really good in melee. I usually prefer to put her on her Manticore mount, but I don't think she provides any global bonuses at all. And she boosts, I think, Witch Elves and Sisters of Slaughter, which you can make an okay army out of that, but it's nowhere near as good as what these two can do. So I think she's B tier. She's probably, out of all the legendary lords for the Dark Elves, I usually prioritize getting her the least. She's just not that important at all. Then we've got Lockyer Fellheart. Lockyer is an S tier legendary lord now. He's really, really good. He's a good melee combatant. He gets a dragon. He can regen. And he boosts a pretty nasty Black Ark Corsair handbow army, especially considering he can now give them Stalk. Now that army can start to struggle a little bit in the late campaign, but in the early stages of the campaign, that can be very useful for you to get things up and running very quickly. Now his faction ability is to get loads of Black Arks. It's not his ability, but when you confederate him, you get whatever Black Ark he's already created, so that's very useful. And then he provides a bunch of global bonuses as well. So he's definitely lower than these two. He's at the lower end of 9, whereas these are at the higher end of 9. They're like 9.6, where he might be a 9.1. I believe when I rated him earlier, I probably put him in this area here. But having since played a campaign with Lockyer Fellheart, I think he definitely deserves S tier now. He's very, very good. Then we've got Malice Darkblade. So Malice, I think, belongs in B tier. One of the best melee combatants in the game, especially, he's one of the primary candidates for the Sword of Cain, which don't really recommend doing that even if you're playing as Dark Elves, because you can have some massive public order problems with that, because they can't infinitely just increase their public order like the High Elves and Lizard Men, and because they're getting a lot of interns, quote unquote, they can have public order issues in some places. But he is an amazing melee combatant. Being able to summon Sarkhan is very useful. He's actually more useful out of his own faction than into it. It's a bit of a weird situation there, because when you're playing Azhag Grief, you've got to manage his possession level, but when you confederate him, he's fully possessed at all times, with none of the penalties. So he doesn't provide very good bonuses for his army, like mostly boosting Cold One Knights, which are garbage, probably one of the worst units in Dark Elf roster, so just ignore that entirely. And he doesn't really provide any serious global bonuses. A little bit, but not much. So I think B tier is all he's going to get there. But he is a really good melee combatant for sure. Then we've got Rakarth. So Rakarth is a bit of a weird one. I don't like Rakarth that much. He's just okay. I'd probably put him at B tier as well. He gets a dragon, but I don't feel like he's a great dragon rider. Like, Emrick will beat the crap out of him, in my opinion. A lot of his active abilities kind of suck. They're just a little bit low tier. He's pretty okay at boosting, like, dragons, and maybe I should put him in the A tier. I don't know. Because I don't think he provides any global bonuses whatsoever. Look, I really don't feel like he's an A tier legendary lord. He doesn't have that sort of killer instincts like that Teklus has. Even if he does boost his army to a decent degree, I've used a Hydra Doomstack with him, and I've used a Charybdis Doomstack with him, and I've used a Dragon Doomstack with him, and they're not that special because you really do need life magic in order to boost, to like get the full use out of them, and Dark Elves don't get that. Of course, Hydras can regenerate on their own. And he does give Charybdis the ability to use a breath attack, but something about Rakarth just feels off, like he's just not that good. But that just might be my opinion about that. So I know some people really like Rakarth, but I've just not warmed up to him. I don't think he's like awful, I just think he's really average. Alright, moving on to Skaven, we've got Queek Headtaker. So Queek is a bit of a weird one, because Queek actually provides a lot of penalties to his faction due to loyalty with Greyseers, which is really important, because Greyseers are some of your best lords that you want to recruit, and reducing their loyalty sucks. So he's really good when confederating into Clan Eshin, because none of those effects will matter. But he does also provide some good global bonuses as well. He's providing global bonuses to Public Order and Storm Vermin recruit time, which I don't value at all because Storm Vermin are rubbish. He is a good melee combatant, and he boosts his army with Clan Rats and Storm Vermin, so I don't value that very highly. I'm definitely leaning towards giving him B tier, almost C tier. He's not that good. I'm gonna put him at B tier, but just understand that it's teetering on the edge of C tier there, just not that good at all. Alright, then we've got Skrulk. Alright, Skrulk I'm gonna put at A tier, because he is really good. He provides good global bonuses, decent boosts to his army. I know he boosts Plague Monks, but also reduces the upkeep costs of Plague Priests as well. Actually, maybe he should go down to A tier. Because that's not that big of a deal. You're not going to get that many in your army. Yeah, I think I'll put him down to A tier. He is a really good spellcaster. Being able to cast Plague at like 6 Winds of Magic is really good. And I don't think the global bonuses are that substantial with him as well. So yeah, I think he's at A tier, teetering almost at S tier. Because he's not that good in melee. He doesn't have a mount. He's a bit slow. Comparatively to other legendary lords in the game. So I think A tier is where that's going to go. Then next up, we've got Tretch Craventail. D tier. One of the worst legendary lords in the game. He's okay in melee, and that's about the extent that he's good. Doesn't provide any global bonuses, and boosts terrible units, like friggin' Storm Vermin. Just terrible, terrible legendary lord. Not worth even bothering trying to confederate. He's nothing more than a joke. He does have very good ambush success chance, but all Skaven can have very good ambush success chance. So he's exceptional in the area that every Skaven is exceptional. So in the trash with you, dipshit. Then we've got Ikiclaw. Ikiclaw is definitely S tier. He is down and all around. He's got you. So he's amazing on the battlefield. Giving him a Doom Flayer mount is usually what I like to do. It makes him small and relatively fast. Going around casting Warp Lightning and tanking things, he's really good. He's got a regen ability with Second Wind Serum, which is very good. Really good spellcaster. He boosts Rattling Guns and Giselles by a ton. Well, actually, that's it within his faction, I suppose. He reduces the upkeep cost of weapon teams, which is very useful. So he can have a cheaper weapons team army, which is the more cost-effective Skaven Doom stack. They've got others, though. And he provides some decent global bonuses, providing extra public order, which the Skaven kind of need. So, very good Legendary Lord there. He just provides everything that the Skaven needs. Just really, really great. Then we've got Snitch. Snitch I would probably put as A tier as well. As Skrulk. So he's got some really good global bonuses in there. Being able to boost the recruit rank of lords and heroes is really, really good for Skaven. He does boost heroes in his army. You can actually make a really good chieftain doomstack with him. And he's one of the best killers in the game. Not the best melee combatants, but one of the best killers in the game. If you have a hero or enemy lord that's in amongst melee infantry fighting, and then you send Snitch to snap him in the back, very, very useful. So I'm going to leave him at A tier there. Very good Legendary Lord. Then we've got Throt the Unclean. I'm going to put Throt at S tier. Throt is really good. He's very good melee combatant because he gets a Brood Horror mount, so he's got regen. Oh, he's got regen just on foot as well. He hits really hard, and he's very fast. He boosts monsters like absolute crazy. The only problem with him, though, he doesn't have any global bonuses, does he? So maybe he belongs in A tier. Yeah. He feels like an S tier Legendary Lord, but without that criteria for global bonuses. He provides global bonuses for Clan Molder, but that's not that useful when you're not playing as Clan Molder. We're not taking that into consideration. So it wouldn't be fair to put him at S tier and Teklus at A tier when they've essentially got one area that they provide nothing with their faction. So yeah, A tier for him. Okay, so I think in the faction ratings, all the Skaven factions were like all S tier, but their Legendary Lords are a little bit lower than what their faction capabilities are. So, like, for example, one of Iciclaw's greatest abilities is actually a Scryer ability because of the Endless Drums, being able to regenerate ammunition for Rattling Guns, and also nuclear weapons. That's a Clan Scryer ability, not Iciclaw's. Alright, next up we've got the Vampire Coast. Oh my god. I'm already at half an hour. I need to hurry up. This is going to be a very long video otherwise. Alright, Luther Hacon. He is... I'm going to put him at A tier. He's a... It's hard to say he's a good spellcaster because he can get spells. He's actually a bad spellcaster. He's very, very tanky and anti-magic. He's very good in that regard. So good combatant. Boosting his army does a little bit here and there. Nothing to note. And in terms of faction-wide abilities, I think one of the problems with the Vampire Coast is that because they can't confederate, you got to be a little bit more lenient with them because they have to rely just on themselves within their faction. It'll be the same sort of thing with their Tomb Kings. They can't just confederate somebody else to cover a gap because, yeah, they don't have that confederation ability. So Luther Hacon can... He's very good on the battlefield, basically, but he doesn't really provide much boost apart from that, in my opinion. Then we've got Noctulus. Noctulus, I would say, is actually an S-tier Legendary Lord, although... It's difficult to rate the Vampire Coast because... actually, no, I think Noctulus is actually an A tier, now that I think about it, because a lot of what makes him good is actually his faction's ability. And we've already rated his faction. So he gets a Necrofex mount, very powerful. He's also a good spellcaster, better spellcaster than Luther Hacon. He does boost, what's it called? The Necrofex Colossus in his army, so that's useful. I don't think he provides very good global bonuses, which is why I don't want to put him at S tier. But we got to be a little bit more lenient with them because they only get one Legendary Lord for whichever one you play as. So I think he's very close to hitting S tier, but comparing him to these ones here, he just doesn't meet the mark. Alright, then we've got Aranessa. Aranessa, I think, is actually a C tier Legendary Lord. She is okay in melee. She gets one of the worst bouts in the game, a Rotting Promethean. I think she's actually better off on foot. She's not undead, so you can't actually give her... like in the Hecker to heal her. She doesn't really boost her army or faction at all, but she's definitely better than these two here. Definitely better. So I think C tier is where she belongs. Then we've got Aranessa Salt Spite. Sorry, Aranessa. We've already covered her. We've got, what's her name? Silostra Diaphin. My god. She's a bit of a weird one because she's also kind of an A-tier legendary lord. But she's annoying. That's her biggest problem. She boosts ethereal units by a ton because she provides loads of physical resistance, which is very useful. She's also a decent spellcaster of the deeps, and she's decent in melee combat. She gets a good mount, the Rotting Leviathan, as opposed to the Rotting Promethean. So she is actually very good. Her faction's a bit weird though, but that's fine. Alright, then we've got the Tomb Kings. Alright, Cetra is an S-tier legendary lord. Okay, so he's really good on the battlefield. He's kind of a lame spellcaster, but at least he is a spellcaster, because Tomb Kings, they need more spellcasters, so any spellcasters you get, level them up in that regard. He also gets a Chariot of the Gods, or a what's it called? Cambrian War Sphinx, which is both really good mounts. He does provide loads of global bonuses in terms of growth and public order, although I think the growth is actually part of his faction mechanic. But in his actual skill tree with his equipment, he does get public order bonuses, which is very useful for Tomb Kings. And he boosts Tomb Guard, which you're going to have a ton of, which is not the best Doom stack that they can build by a long shot, but you kind of need to utilize most of the Tomb King roster, so giving him a Tomb Guard army is actually quite viable and quite effective with him. He's definitely not a 10 out of 10 legendary lord, but he's in the low 9s, I think. Then we've got Katep. I think Katep is an A tier legendary lord, because at least he provides loads of extra Lich Priests to his army, to his faction, which is very useful, because you're going to otherwise have not that many of them to cover all your armies. He's an okay spellcaster, same as Cetra, Lore of Nehekara, which isn't a good lore of magic. He has a bit of a weird mount. He gets a Casket of Soul, so he's essentially an artillery piece. So he's okay in that regard. And as for boosting his army, he doesn't really do anything, which is why he doesn't quite reach the S tier there. Alright, then we've got Khalida. Khalida is B tier, teetering on the edge of C tier. She provides no global bonuses. You know what? No, she is C tier. She provides no global bonuses, doesn't increase the hero capacity of anything, which is what all the other 3 Tomb King Legendary Lords do. Her faction ability is to increase ammunition, I think, to all units. She's okay at commanding an Archer army or a Necropolis Knight army, but those are not really high priorities. Kind of weird saying that archers aren't a high priority, especially in the late campaign. Eventually you want to phase out basic archers. They're just going to get outmatched. But yeah, she's definitely not a D tier, but she's just a bit lacking. She's okay melee combatant. She's the only one that's not a spellcaster. Out of all of the Tomb King Legendary Lords, she's definitely the worst. And then we've got Archon the Black, which is pretty similar to Katep in terms of what he does faction-wide. He provides extra Lich Priests, which is very useful. He boosts heroes in his army, which can be useful. So if you want to put all of your Tomb Princes in his army, that can actually make them very strong. I don't really recommend doing that, but if you want to do that, you can. So, and he's an okay spellcaster. He gets a Chariot mount, which is okay, not as good as Cetra's Chariot, but he's a spellcaster of Death, which is better than Lore of Nehekara. But overall, I think he's an A-tier legendary lord. So Khalid is definitely falling behind there. Alright, next we're up to the Empire. So Karl Franz. Where are we going to put you? Karl Franz is pretty bloody average, but he does provide some good things. I think he's B-tier. He's B-tier teetering on A-tier. So he's okay in melee. He does get a Griffin mount. Deathclaw's okay. He doesn't have regen by default. But he can get it fairly easily if he goes beat up on Isabella, but we shouldn't take that into consideration. He provides leadership to his entire army, which is very useful if you want to hold the line at all, especially on legendary difficulty. So maybe I should put him at A tier. And with Galmaraz, he does provide a bit of extra public order, which isn't critical for the Empire. I'm really feeling like he's at the higher end of B tier. That's where I feel like he should be. Then we've got Volkmar the Grim, which I'm also going to put at B tier. Previously, I've said that Volkmar was one of the worst legendary lords in the game, but he's since been updated, and now he provides some decent bonuses. giving him a early game flagellant or first company militia army is actually quite viable. He is an amazing melee combatant, much better than Karl Franz. I think he provides a few global bonuses. Yeah, he provides, with the Staff of Command, he provides +3 public order. And now he's got that ability that all archlectors have, so it's kind of generic, so I shouldn't really take that into consideration. But providing untainted all characters and extra success chance on witch hunters and warrior priests is very useful, but any archlector can do that. And so yeah, he boosts average units. He's got sort of an okay global bonus, and he is a good melee combatant. Alright, then we've got Balthazar Gelt. Alright, Gelty boy, I'm going to put you at S tier because I think you deserve it. Okay, so he's a really good spellcaster, not quite as good as Teklus, because he does have Law of Metal, which is not that great, but casting Searing Doom for 1 Winds of Magic is insane. Like, that's really, really good. He's got a really fast mount with Quicksilver, so that's really good. He primarily boosts, like, steam tanks. That's kind of his Doom stack. He's really the only Legendary Lord within the Empire that kind of has a designated Doom stack. And he does provide loads of global bonuses in terms of Battle Wizards, so that's very useful. Being able to recruit more of them and at higher rank, that's very useful. So I'm going to put him at S tier there. But he's at the lower end of S tier there. Then we've got Marcus Wolfheart. Okay. I think he's also a B tier Legendary Lord. He's obviously a very good archer. I think his Amber Bow abilities are a bit finicky, not particularly accurate. He does have the Trapper ability, essentially like a Net of Amantok. That's very useful. His go-to army is Huntsmen. Those are very good under his command because he gives them essentially double shot, which is really good. But he doesn't provide any global bonuses. So he's good on the battlefield. He's good commander. He just doesn't provide anything for the faction. So that's the main reason why he's only hitting B tier there. Okay, now we move on to dwarfs. We've got Thorgram Grudgebearer. Okay, Thorgram, I think, hits the A tier mark because he's decent in melee. He's a bit of a large target, but he is decent. Very tanky, got a lot of health. He doesn't really boost his army by that much, so I'm starting to lean towards B tier. Because he boosts Hammerers primarily. Hammerers and Longbeards, which are not your most effective campaign units. And he does have some decent global bonuses. Yeah, I think he actually belongs in B tier. I know that goes in the book, whatever. But he just doesn't really do that much comparative to other Dwarf Legendary Lords. Grom Brindle, I feel like, is an A tier Legendary Lord. He provides massive global bonuses, sort of at the cost of his own abilities, because they replace his generic blue line. Being able to provide extra replenishment, though, is really good, and global bonuses to campaign movement range is really good for the dwarfs, and recruit rank, and global recruit slots. Actually, global recruit slots is not really necessary because they can do that through certain buildings. Really good melee combatant, and also provides massive bonuses to his army. I guess that's the big thing that makes him a bit better than Thorgram. Thorgram's army bonuses just are a bit lacking, whereas Grombrundle's are pretty damn impressive. Yeah, giving him like an Iron Drake army can be absolutely insane. Also, he boosts the speed by 35% of his entire army. That's really good. Then we've got Bellagar. I think Bellagar actually belongs in S tier. So he's really tanky. Giving him a Rune of Spite is very good, but I shouldn't take that into consideration because anyone can get a Rune of Spite. He boosts his army with Rangers by an absolute ton, and he provides loads of global bonuses. So he's a really good Legendary Lord. Definitely meets the criteria for S tier by getting ticks in all 3 categories, which is usually where other Legendary Lords lack. So that's why he's getting up there. Then we've got Ungrim Iron Fist. I think Ungrim belongs in B tier because he doesn't provide any global bonuses. Yeah, he doesn't provide any global bonuses, and he boosts Slayers. Now, those Slayers can be very good. They used to be better, but his main thing is that he is an amazing melee combatant, but only being good in one area usually lands you in the B tier. Being good in 2 areas lands you in the A tier. Being good in all 3 areas lands you in S tier. And being bad in certain areas leads you into the C and D tier. Being bad in all areas leads you into D. Okay, then we got Thorek Ironbrow. Thorek, I think, is an A tier Legendary Lord. He doesn't provide a ton of global bonuses in his skill tree, but he does boost his army by a ton, and he is a decent runesmith. But the best runesmith isn't anywhere near as good as like the worst magic caster, unless you have an entire army of runesmiths. But then again, that entire army of wizards would be also quite insane. He's decent in melee. He's got some good abilities, boosting quarrelers and grudge throwers like crazy. But yeah, just lacking those global bonuses there with him. Alright, now we move on to greenskins. We got Grimgore Ironhide, the best C tier legendary lord in the game. Okay, so Grimgore is a great fighter, and that's the extent of his skills. He boosts Black Orcs, which, that's fine. It's just not that big of a deal. Oh, hang on. You know what? I'm going to put him at B tier, because he does have one of the most effective doom stacks in the game. It just requires you to get a bit of, put in a bit of work. With his The Immortals. So, The Immortals is what saved him from going into C tier there. He doesn't provide any other global bonuses at all, so he's just a really, like, one-dimensional character in this, among such, like, so much better people exist in the game than Grimgore. But I think part of the problem with Grimgore is that because he's got that moniker of being the best, people always just say, oh, he's the best, but he's actually fucking crap. He is good in melee. If anyone actually wants to go in and fight him, most people will try to avoid him for the most part. Whenever I go up against him, I usually take him out pretty easily. Then we've got Scarsnake. Scarsnake is not very good either. Leaning towards maybe C tier with him. We'll put him at C tier and let's talk about him. I might boost him back up. So he's actually really bad in melee. He's anti-large, but he's not a very good melee combatant. He's not a spellcaster. He does have some abilities that he can use to boost units in the area. He primarily boosts goblins, but he's not that great at it compared to other characters can do very similar things. And he provides, I think, 3 public order globally for the greenskins. Okay, because of that 3 public order, because of his Scarsnake's Prodder, he goes back up to B tier. But yeah, he is quite lacking. Alright, then we got Wurzag. Wurzag is an S tier legendary lord because he does all 3 categories. He's amazing on the battlefield. He's really good spellcaster with the Foot of Gork. The Foot of Gork. Then we've got, you gotta say it right. Then you've got, he's an amazing battle commander because he boosts literally every unit in their roster with physical resistance. But he's got so many doom stacks. Probably the legendary lord with the most number of doom stacks. Whether you want to go with Savage Orcs, the various different Savage Orcs, you want to go with Trolls, you want to go with Giants, you want to go with the Ragnarok Spiders, they all work under his command, and he provides some good global bonuses, a little bit here and there. Definitely not a 10 out of 10 Legendary Lord. The global bonuses is where he lacks, but he allows you to recruit more wizards and at higher recruit ranks, so that's very useful. But he's at the lower end of S tier there, so just like 9 out of 10, where, yeah, anyway. Moving on to Grom. I think Grom is an A-tier legendary lord. Very good melee combatant. He'll easily get more kills than Grimgore, but obviously he's not the best duelist. But one of the great things about Grom is that he can fight while moving. Very useful for when, like, just punching through loads of infantry. And he's got one of the highest masses in the game, so just his chariot's just really good. You just got to watch out for things that have higher mass than them that get him stuck, like monsters and some cavalry units. But apart from that, he's really good in melee. He boosts goblins by an absolute ton, and goblins are really effective, so giving him a nasty stalker army is very effective, or just any kind of goblin army. And I don't think he provides any serious global bonuses. His faction does, but he himself doesn't. So that's why he's only getting A tier there. But he was fairly close to getting into S tier. And then we've got Azhag. I think Azhag, I'm going to put him at A tier to begin with, and we'll talk about him, and maybe I'll put him into B tier. Let's think about it. Because he is a spellcaster. He's got some really good spellcasting now. Some good bound abilities. He's got regen, and he's on a wyvern. He's the only one of the greenskins that are able to fly out of their legendary lords. His boost in the army is for like regular orcs and biggins, which is not a high priority. And I can't think of any of the global bonuses that he provides. I think he provides a little bit, but not that much. So I think I'll leave him at A tier, but he's at the lower amount of A tier there. I definitely feel like Azhag is better than Grimgore and Scarsnake. Alright, moving on to the vampire accounts. Now, the funny thing with them is that they're all like 10 out of 10 in terms of like their battle capabilities. They're all just amazing spellcasters. So, maybe I have to be a little bit harsher on the vampire accounts because they need their legendary lords more than anyone. Okay. So Manfred. I don't think Manfred could hit S tier because I don't think he provides any global bonuses whatsoever. It's a bit weird because I don't think he boosts his army either. But he's such an amazing spellcaster. Like, really, really good. Like, in terms of his statistic, his skill set, he probably should enter B tier. Because he doesn't provide any global bonuses, doesn't really boost his army. He's just really, really good magic. He doesn't belong near these ones here. He's better than all of them. Even if the other categories he doesn't provide anything. Yeah. He's just better than them. I can't let him go into the B tier. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe because the vampire accounts don't need as much global bonuses. They get it through their bloodline, so they don't need their legendary lords to do it. Yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it at A tier there, but at the lower end of A tier. Then we've got Hillman Caused, which I'll also put under A tier. And it's a similar sort of thing with him. Like, he doesn't really provide any serious army boosts. I don't think he provides any global bonuses. But he's essentially a Mortis engine, which is really good. And he's a really good spellcaster. And that's the big thing with the vampire accounts. They're all just good spellcasters. They're kind of one-dimensional, but they're really, really good. Like, these guys can take out entire armies by themselves, and their faction just doesn't really need them to boost them. Nor does their army, because their armies are usually shit stacks. So, the fact that they're not boosting skeleton warriors is like, yeah, it's fine, it's not that important. But here's the thing, Vlad. Vlad is actually an S tier legendary lord, because he does boost skeleton warriors. But he doesn't just boost it for himself, he boosts it for everybody with experience. That's really important. Getting a global bonus to experience means that the longer that you have your skeleton armies, the more experienced they're going to be. So vampire armies will usually be very experienced under Vlad. So he provides some good bonuses there. I actually played a vampire account campaign recently, and I think they might have had some other global bonuses, but I just can't remember what they are. Yeah, his global bonus kind of counts as like a command skill and a global bonus. And also, he's a really good spellcaster and melee combatant. The only lacking thing that he has is he doesn't have a mount, whereas everyone else does. So that's probably he'd probably teeter at the lower end of S tier. Alright, then we've got Isabella. So Isabella will go into S tier as well, because she's an amazing spellcaster, just like everybody else. Everybody else is a vampire caster. But she gets a really good mount. She's got the Hellsteed. And she actually does have a Doom stack. She can have like loads of heroes in her army, and vampires specifically. So she works really well with that. She boosts vampires by a lot. I think she does have global bonuses. I just can't remember exactly what it was, but I know that she does actually have a global bonus that's actually very useful. It's a very new addition. I just can't remember off the top of my head exactly what it is. And then we got Heinrich Kemmler. Heinrich Kemmler, I think, belongs in A tier as well, because he's arguably the best spellcaster out of all of them, because he can cast like Nehek really cheap and Winds of Death for the cheapest, like 17 Winds of Magic overcasted, or was it 19, something like that. Very, very cheap. He provides decent boosts when he's in combat with his equipment to skeleton armies. I can't recall him actually providing any global bonuses though, which is why he's just not under S tier. I guess my memory is just a little bit shaky with these ones here. Just because the vampire accounts don't rely on their legendary lords on those regards very much at all. They just don't really need it. Because the vampire accounts just have everything they already need already built into their faction. And all their factions are very similar. Alright, so now let's move on to the to Norska. So Wulfric the Wanderer is one of the few 10 out of 10 legendary lords in this game, because he's a great melee combatant on a mammoth, right? Really, really good. He provides massive bonuses to mammoths, and he provides a +5 global bonus to public order to Norscar, which is actually critical, because when you're creating outposts, most of those outposts are going to be in areas that have low chaos corruption, at least to begin with. So having Wulfric the Wanderer allows you to leave those outposts earlier, so before a revolt occurs, because there's no point in creating an outpost, walking away, and then it getting blown up or whatever due to a revolt, which is what happens a lot to Norscar, because the chaos corruption south of the world is actually quite low most of the time. So Wulfric the Wanderer is needed in his faction more than any other legendary lord in the game, because Norscar is so bloody weak just naturally. They need Wulfric the Wanderer, and it's such a stark contrast when compared to Throg, who I'm not going to put under D tier. I'm going to put him under C tier. Let's be fair to Throg. Alright, he's not good, but he's not the worst. These two here are definitely worse than him, because you can make a decent troll stack. I wouldn't go with Fimir's. Fimir's a shit. Trolls are way better than Fimir. You can make a decent troll stack with him. He is a good melee combatant, and he doesn't provide any global bonuses to his faction at all. I just don't think he's a good lord, because generic lords are kind of better than Throg, which is why he's so down on the list. Even if he can boost units by a fair bit, he just boosts the wrong units. Norscar is a very one-dimensional faction at the moment. They are in desperate need of a rework, and even though their skills got reworked, Throg still just doesn't really provide much value to his faction at all. In fact, generic lords are often better than him, which is why I put him where he is. Alright, now we move on to Bretonnia. Lewin Leoncoeur. Don't think he provides any global bonuses, but he does boost his army, and he's a good melee combatant, so I think I'm going to put him under A tier, because yeah, you can't hit S tier unless you're doing something for your faction as a whole. He's very good with knights. He provides extra replenishment rate for them. And he's just an absolute god on the battlefield. Being able to regen and just tank like crazy on Beaquy, he's just really, really good. Then we've got Alberic. He's also an A tier legendary lord, because he does actually provide global bonus. He doesn't do that much for his army. Does do a little bit, not tons. But he does provide some global bonuses in... he improves the Peasants' Duty edict, which is quite good, because that's one of the best ones, with extra growth and public order. And he does provide extra income from ports in all regions. And he's not quite as good in melee as Lewin Leoncoeur, but he is pretty good. So he's not as bad as I've made him out to be in the past. One time I actually said he was the worst legendary lord in the game. No, it's one of these two. Okay, then you get Fey Enchantress. Alright, Fey Enchantress is definitely the best out of the legendary lords for the Bretonians, but I can't off the top of my head remember. I don't think she's got any global bonuses, which is really important. But anyway, one of the great things about the Fey Enchantress is that beating her ass actually gives you extra replenishment, so it's really good for other... I don't know if I should count that. It's really good for Lewin Leoncoeur and Alberic to actually defeat her in battle before confederating her. But she's arguably one of the best life spellcasters in the game. She's essentially a Mortis engine when you send her into melee, so she's very good in that regard. I think she's overall a very good legendary lord. I think she belongs in A tier. She's definitely better than these B tier ones. And then you've got Rapance. I think Rapance belongs in A tier as well. Man, they're just all A tier. Bretonnia doesn't really need a lot of global bonuses, I suppose, because their faction's already quite strong. They don't have public order issues, and they don't really have upkeep cost issues. They just got a really strong faction to begin with. So Rapance, good melee fighter. You know, she only gets a horse mount, but that's okay. She's good on that horse. She's got some good abilities. Just wondering, maybe she does actually belong under B tier. When I think about her compared to the others, she kind of like boosts peasants, which isn't ideal. She doesn't have ways at which she really distincts herself from this. A lot of her abilities come from her faction, from Chevalier de Leonis. Yeah, I'm going to put her at B tier, but teetering on the edge of A tier there. Alright, now we're on to Wood Elves. Orion. Ooh, definitely C tier. Total garbage. Doesn't belong in D tier, though. He's an okay combatant on the battlefield. You know, he's got some spells with some bound abilities, and he's okay in melee, and he's a missile unit. He's okay. But that's really all he provides. He doesn't provide any. He does provide one global bonus, so it allows It allows you to, like, spot hidden units anywhere, which, that's interesting. Oh, wait, I don't know if that's a global... I don't think it's a global bonus, actually. I think it's just for him. But yeah, he doesn't provide much. He boosts freaking Wild Riders and Cavalry, which are some of the least effective units in the... Well, not, they're just a lower tier unit in the Wood Elf roster. He doesn't do what their faction really needs him to do. So he's just not that good. Durthu gets to be, I think, an A-tier Legendary Lord. I can't think off the top of my head his global bonuses. I don't think he really provides any. But he's an amazing fighter. And he's got the Lore of Beasts, which, like I said, I've warmed up to it. Going down his Beast Magic line can be quite good. I think he can actually cast some of his spells for free. Just some of the buff spells. Either that or for 1 Winds of Magic, I just can't remember. But the main thing with him is that he boosts Treemen by a ton by making them super cheap. And since the Wood Elves are definitely not one of the richest races in the game, having a cheap super Doom stack is very good with Durthu. And then if you need a Life Wizard, well, you can just attach a Life Wizard. So I think, yeah, Durthu belongs in A tier there. Okay, Sisters of Twilight, though, they belong under S tier because they just got everything under control, right? They make really good Dragon Doom stacks. I was going to say Hawk Riders, but Hawk Riders is with their faction, not with her, because the arrows of Volley of Kurnos, while she can boost the number of them, that's only useful when playing as the Heralds of Ariel. Not when with other factions. We got to take that into consideration, as if they're in a generic faction. She's really good on the battlefield, whether she's on her Eagle or her Dragon. Just really, really powerful. So hard to kill. And she does provide a bunch of global bonuses, like extra relations with... does she really belong in S tier? Considering the Wood Elves need her more than like other Legendary Lords are needed, she teeters on the lower end of S tier, I think. Yeah, they're very, very good. And then we've got Dryka. So Dryka's a bit of a weird one. In her own faction, she's very good, but in a generic faction, she doesn't really provide that much. So I'm actually going to put her at B tier. She's a spellcaster, Lore of Shadows. She's alright at it. She boosts Dryads, which they're good in the early game. I don't think she provides any other global bonuses aside from that. So I think with her is just a bit average, that's all. Alright, now we move on to Beastmen. Alright, Kazrak. Kazrak, I kind of want to put him at A tier, but teeters on the edge of B tier. So he's pretty good in melee, and he makes a pretty nasty Razorgore Chariot Doomstack and a Bestigore Doomstack. Yeah, he does a bit, just it doesn't really hit the S tier mark there. He's okay. Like, he just provides, you know, he's pretty generic, I suppose. But, you know, you can make him work. Okay. Then we've got Malagor. Malagor is an S tier Legendary Lord. He just provides so much. He reduces the Winds of Magic cost for all characters, which is just S tier on its own. He actually doesn't boost his army much at all, but he doesn't need an army. Because, well, actually, the way he boosts his army is by making enemy units absolutely terrified just by his presence on the battlefield. Like, he can get minus 15 leadership to all units in the local area, so it doesn't have to be on the battlefield to provide that. But that's also kind of like a campaign ability, but I feel like that should boost his army. And of course, he's one of the best spellcasters in the game. Being a small flying unit, he's so hard to shoot, and he's so hard to like lock down in combat. You basically need a net of Amentok or something to get him. Very hard to kill Malagor, and he's just an absolute killing machine. And he just doesn't need an army, but if he does have an army, units will run away a lot sooner when he's nearby. So that's really good. Then we've got Morgur. So Morgur's an interesting one because I think he belongs in A tier. With Morgur, he is like the best Mortis engine in the game because he doesn't have to actually be in melee in order to cause his like decaying effect, his aura of transmutation. He boosts a really nasty Jabberslath Doomstack. You could also go with Chaos Spawn, but Chaos Spawn are kind of crap, even under his command. Definitely would prefer to go Jabberslash with him, but I also don't think he provides any global bonuses off the top of my head, which is why he's just not hitting S tier there. So otherwise, he also doesn't get a mount, which kind of hurts him a little bit, but he is very good. Used to be total crap, but now he's much better. Then we've got Torok's the Brass Bull. Okay, so Torok's faction is arguably the strongest in the game, but when you pull Torok out of that and put him into his own army, into a generic faction, I'd say he probably hits A tier, because he's really good on the battlefield, undeniably with that. Really, really powerful, can deal just about anyone. Boosts a really nasty Minotaur Doom stack, but I can't really think of any ways that he boosts his race as a whole, so that's why he's just getting an A tier there. His faction definitely does with the Rampage mechanic, but, you know, he doesn't get that when he's playing as, like, Kazrak or whatever. Alright, now we're moving on to the last faction. We got Archaon. So, Archaon. I kind of feel like he's an A tier Legendary Lord, because he's an okay spellcaster, not great at it. He's really good in melee. He boosts his army by a bit with, like, Chaos Knights and Chosen, which are not what you should be getting. Don't think he has any global bonuses. His faction, like, when you choose him to begin with, he does. Like, I think he's B tier, but teeters almost at A tier. Because, yeah, he just... His race really does need more of an oomph, and he doesn't really provide the oomph that's needed. And then we've got Kurlek Suneater, who I think goes under A tier, because he's a really good melee combatant, obviously. And he boosts Shaggoths by a ton. And if you want to have a really strong Chaos campaign, you gotta go Shaggoths. Doesn't really matter which Legendary Lord you're playing as. Like, Shaggoths just outperform every other unit in their roster, and since upkeep cost just isn't really a big deal for the Warriors of Chaos, because that's how they make money, is by killing stuff, not by... you just don't worry about upkeep costs that much, as long as your armies are fighting lots of battles, which Shaggoths absolutely can. And so under Kolek, the Shaggoths perform their best. I don't think it provides any global bonuses, though. And then we've got Sigvold. I think Sigvold is also going to go into B tier, or maybe even C tier. No, I'm going to put him at B tier because he's really good at growing hordes, which is really useful in the early campaign. So you use Sigvold to grow hordes, because he's in his baseline, in his trait, he does provide +3 extra growth. Growth is not that much of a concern for Warriors of Chaos, but he does do it a little bit better. He does make a pretty nasty, oh, actually not nasty, but very cheap Marauder stack. But I don't value that very highly because, like I said before, reducing the upkeep cost on Marauders is just not... You just don't need to do it. You're much better off making a super expensive army that just kills 5 armies per turn than making an army that's dirt cheap but has to pick and choose their engagements with absolute care. He also has some campaign malices actually by increasing the upkeep cost of all lords once you choose that, which isn't that big of a deal. Like I said, upkeep cost isn't that big of a deal. So B tier for him. And then we've got Gotrek. So Gotrek is only available when playing as a Bretonnian, Empire, or Dwarf faction. Now, he is more useful for some of them than others. He is not particularly useful for Bretonnia, because Bretonnia doesn't have supply lines. See, the big benefit to Gotrek is that he is completely free. He's immune to supply lines, as in he doesn't increase the supply line. He isn't immune to it. Like, the units that he has in his army will be affected by it, but he doesn't increase the supply lines, which is very good. Kind of like a Black Ark, in a way. But he doesn't have any, like, skills that you can distribute. He does get stronger the more times you recruit him. So he is a good melee combatant, but he doesn't boost his army or his faction at all. So the big thing with him is that he's an emergency legendary lord. I'm going to put him under B tier. Even though he's kind of worse than these guys here, right? Like, he really should be here because he's got no skills whatsoever. But the fact that he is immune from supply lines makes him very useful on legendary difficulty to the dwarfs and to the Empire, because he basically keeps your upkeep costs down a fair bit. So that's why I'm going to put him under B tier there. And of course, he comes with Felix. I think we should take that into consideration as well. They come as a pair. Anyway, that's the legendary lord tier list there. There are definitely some areas where I just can't remember off the top of my head about certain skills. So I really, in those particular times, I just went with how I felt about those legendary lords, like specifically with the vampire accounts. I play a fair bit of vampire accounts, but I couldn't for the life of me remember any of the global bonuses that Manfred had. I don't think he's got any. But if I did get anything wrong, do feel free to correct me. But I would still pretty much stand by the positioning of all of these here. These two are definitely the worst in the game. They're just such useless legendary lords. I almost put Throg under D tier. I think it's just with Throg that I just have a personal hatred of him because he's like one of the weakest legendary lords in one of the weakest races in the game. Whereas Treach, for example, he is one of the weakest legendary lords in one of the strongest races in the game. And Nakai is one of the weakest legendary lords in a pretty strong race. So they're compensated by their race, whereas this one here is not. Anyway, that's the end of this one here, guys. Let me know what you think about any of these positions. Let me know if you agree or disagree. Curious to know your thoughts. We went over an hour, which is not what I wanted. Oh well, there's a lot to talk about here. Anyway, that's the end of this one. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you next time, fuckers. Bye.